Welcome back, lovely listeners, to our first episode of 2021. We hope the year's been good to you so far. And on behalf of the team here at DNA Paranormal Services, we thank you for joining us. In this episode of our podcast, we're actually going to have a look at the differences between ghosts, demons, and poltergeists. It's a common question that we get asked. What is the differences between these entities and what causes them to haunt us? Or in the case of demons, they're not haunting us, but seeking to possess. So sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy today's podcast. So today we're going to be having a look at the difference between spirits, or the kinds of spirits, the kinds of hauntings. It's a common question that we get asked when people are new to the field, or when they think that they're having a haunting themselves. How do they know what it is? And also for beginner investigators, how do we know what it is? What tells us what we're dealing with, so we know what to do or what to be on the lookout for? So first we're going to start with ghosts. So ghosts are said to be the soul or remains of a dead person. Usually they are believed to inhabit a realm that we can't naturally access. They are capable of returning in some form and interacting with the world of the living. According to research and descriptions, believers say a ghost may appear as a likeness to a deceased person that they know. There is also, people say they see mists outlined as a human form, right through to full body, clear apparitions of colour. So it ranges from a knowing that there's somebody there to actually seeing a full body apparition. Belief in ghosts is based on the ancient notion that a human spirit is separable from the body and may maintain its existence after the body's death. In many societies and cultures, funeral rituals are believed to prevent the ghost from haunting the living. Some may cover mirrors or perform certain rituals within a certain amount of days to ensure the safe and complete crossing over of their loved one. Ghosts generally experienced some form of trauma in their life, and that may be why, or as part of their death, so a violent death, and that is believed to be why they've not passed over completely. The old classic when it comes to supernatural entities are the belief in ghosts or having a haunted house. They are commonly believed to be the soul or spirit of those who have passed away. They are said to be able to speak, change the temperature of a room. They may knock or ring bells. They may bring smells, whether good or bad. So they may bring, people will say, following the passing of their mum, they may smell her perfume or her favourite flower or the dish that she cooked them that they loved the most. That's a really common one. They may say they saw a butterfly at the time of their burial, things like that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be bad. It is safe to say, though, that when it is things that are unsettling, that spirit is a troubled soul, had perhaps a violent or unexpected death or incomplete business in their human life. Oftentimes they may be confused, so this may be why they are knocking, things like that. They don't know that they've passed, so they don't understand why people can't respond to them, or perhaps even why there is a whole new family now living in their home. They may be trying to get closure for something. Whatever the reason, they have remained partially here. One other similarity in people's descriptions or encounters with ghosts are that they tend to stick to a location. This may be a location where there are events in their human life that they feel particularly strong about. It could relate to the unresolved issues that is holding them here. It may also be the place of their death. this is why you may have a haunted house. There is the argument as well that they can haunt an object that held sentimental value to them. The concept of haunting objects is a very deep one, and there's lots to that, so we'll cover that in depth at another time. But this concept can explain why we have haunted houses or items where the spirit remains regardless of who has the item or who is moving in and out of that space. Common signs may be an inexplicable cold chill in the room or in one area of the room. People report being watched, hearing footsteps. They may hear activity in another room while knowing no one is in there. A place that is haunted is thought to be associated by the haunting spirit with some strong emotional connection to the past. This may include remorse, fear, terror of a violent death, or they were not ready to pass and therefore are holding on. It is said that the traditional visual of seeing a ghost, of hauntings including apparitions or displacement of objects, strange lights, hearing sounds, laughter, singing, screaming, footsteps, and all of those sorts of things, invisible, like music with no source. These are said to be forms of a ghostly manifestation. These ghosts can be actually intelligent, and you can have intelligent communication with them. Some common reasons why a haunting by a ghost may occur. As we said, there may be a traumatic event such as a murder or a car accident. It was violent and sudden. This ties in with, because they died suddenly, they may not realise that. They may have unfinished business. They forgot to tell you there's $1 million in their mattress. Happens. Those they've left behind are so emotionally distraught and can't actually let them go, therefore creating a block to the other side for their loved ones. This sadly does happen. The spirit itself or the person was emotionally connected to their loved ones in a way they wish to stay behind and watch over them. This is more of the kind where they can, they're not stuck with us. They're coming in at times of need to comfort us. Then you have, they're afraid to cross over to the other side. So this is where they're a little bit like the emotionally distressed loved ones not letting go. They, for some reason, can't let go of their physical life here. They may be attached in that way emotionally, or they may actually have not been ready. They were making statements such as they're not ready, or they don't want to be judged on the other side of the veil. So therefore they don't walk through that doorway. In this case, it's often common for mediums to bring someone they trust from the other side to help guide them. The last sort of common one is that some kind of injustice occurred to them. It doesn't necessarily have to be related to their death, such as like a murder or unresolved crime that resulted in their death. It doesn't necessarily have to be that. It can be something else that ties in with unfinished business, but the injustice is against them, and this will hold them here until that has been resolved. Apart from ghosts, the other common haunting or spirit activity is that of the poltergeist. Now, while ghosts can and do present themselves in many forms, whether it be by visually showing themselves to you or making sounds, speaking to you, things like that, the poltergeist is something entirely different. It's not believed to have been a ghost at any point. It's not believed to necessarily have been a human form that's not crossed over properly, that it's something entirely different. That doesn't mean that during an investigation or in a haunting, we don't see both come together. And that can be for a variety of reasons. And we'll look at that in another episode where we take a look at what can cause different hauntings and what we do to figure out what's going on. But generally, a poltergeist does not mean there is a ghost. In fact, more often than not, the two are not related at all, even when we find them in the same space. Poltergeist comes from the German word meaning noisy spirits, and reports of these date back to ancient times. Activity that takes place will start off mildly, sporadically. You might even miss it. It might be knocks or bangs, slight movement of things, the occasional smell, or subtle things like that. The activity will increase in intensity, manifesting itself as voices, full body apparitions. Furniture may begin to move with more strength and violence. It's been known to make beds shake, glasses break, doors bang. This will be violent movements. So where you might say have had a ghost experience and they do open a door, it will be more how a person may open a door slowly with purpose, like slowly with the purpose to open it. A poltergeist banging a door repetitively back and forward is not a ghost. We would immediately say that's poltergeist activity. This tends to be the scariest type of haunting and features a lot in, movies and things like that. People do consider it to be a rare form of haunting. However, that, in my experience, that's not the case, and I find many investigators do talk about it as common. A lot of the time where there's a poltergeist, there may be present a female in her teens. There has even been some cases where they believe the female is actually unknowingly controlling the energy of the poltergeist due to a chemical and energetic spike in energy due to hormones. It is a common theory, and it does seem to be that where there is regular poltergeist activity, there may be teenagers around. Whether they are attracting it, enticing it, or simply sparking it, or it's created by them, it really depends on the circumstances. Some cases can happen around people that are stable and perfectly emotionally calm. This may be due to the opening or invitation of something, and can be a little harder to detect. No two cases are ever the same. It's commonplace to find that one person in the house is more affected by the poltergeist than anybody else. It may even be that no activity at all happens where that person is present. And there are times where we call these people a trigger person, and they are used as a tool in paranormal investigating. And this is where you're looking at the person who is completely calm, may not necessarily be a teenager, may not necessarily be female either, where all other reasons are put aside. We might then use that person in locations as a trigger person. Majority of time the poltergeists are experienced by several people, but will certainly focus on one person. Poltergeists are also believed to feed off of our fear or emotional disturbances. So it can become a bit of a two-way street, and asking which came first, the person's emotional disturbance and fear or the poltergeist, can sometimes be very difficult to determine. When there is not a teenager around that it may be responsible for manifesting such activity, there may be several other spirits in the area. And this is where I was mentioning before that you may have a crossover. You may have the traditional understanding of ghosts and a poltergeist. Sometimes it is also seen in cases where there have been ghosts or residual spirit activity, which we'll talk about in a minute, people have then interacted with those spirits and unknowingly, and in some cases knowingly, opened things up to the spirit world, opened up new doorways and portals and invited other things in. Again, I'll say sometimes this is unwilling, sometimes unknowing, sometimes this is willingly done, thereby opening it up to something darker. And the combination of all those different things comes together, and you will then have spirits who have become angry and frightened by the poltergeist activity or darker entities invited in by, let's say, a seance that has gone not right or hasn't been closed off properly or something like that. So in this particular article, and I'll obviously my links will always be in the notes section, in these cases where you have a combined causes, spirits will appear to pull their energy together in order to become strong enough to move larger objects, create more noises, in order to get their message across if they have one. In order to remedy a situation like this, you need to find the root of the anger so that they can pass over and leave in peace. I'm always reminded of one particular case covered on a show called Paranormal Lockdown, where they found residual energy in a location, had been called there because something darker had started to attach and drain, so heading towards like a possession of one of the owners. And it turned out that what had been peaceful spirits or ghosts in their residual space had been upset and frightened by some entities invited in during a seance and some investigating that had been done unknowingly and not on purpose by the people. And so they had to stop that investigating process, close everything off, clear up all the portals, and allow those spirits that had inhabited that space peacefully for who knows how long to return to that state. On most poltergeist cases, they will disappear without any warning, just as they appeared, and at certain times it may stop suddenly within a few days without any reason. Other times it may go on for years. Most people are just happy to see it go, and that's enough for them, and don't really need to know the whys. However, understanding the hows and whys as best as we can in this field do help you to understand how to keep those things at bay in the future, such as protection and clearing techniques, understanding locations and things like that that you may have picked something up from. I'm always reminded when I think of this of my own teenagers who do have regular poltergeist activity. It's usually sporadic and harmless, but there have been the odd time where it has produced quite violent activity, including ripping a door off a cupboard and tossing my daughter's room around one day, and then nothing for years. So it can happen, and it is worth understanding the difference between poltergeists and regular ghosts. A few times we've mentioned residual haunting activity, so just to give a quick explanation for what this is believed to be. Residual haunting activity can occur when either something traumatic or stressful occurs at a location, or there is a natural magnetic or portal reason why activity is heightened on that particular location. So people have heard of ley lines or grid lines. Spirit activity can be heightened by water, mineral deposits, certain rock types in the ground. So sometimes that can be why there's residual haunting in a location. It can be related to a like a traumatic or an event, or events that have gone on for years that are particularly negative. Jails, mental institutions, hospitals, orphanages, places where 100 years ago, their standard of treating people was not what we see today, and therefore the land is almost embedded with this negativity that sparks paranormal activity. So it's explained here as residual haunting activity can occur when something traumatic or stressful occurs. This may be a murder, for example. Negative energy is then literally blasted into that ground, building, or atmosphere, causing it to imprint like a recording of the events. It's like you're downloading it onto a hard drive, and it will replay that cycle of events over and over again. Spirits involved in this kind of residual activity are often unaware of their surroundings and that the time frame is no longer that which they exist in. This is not an intelligent haunting. You will not be able to get an intelligent interaction going with residual activity. So if you're on an investigation and you're hearing things go on, but you can't get it to respond to you, it may be residual activity. This can also be caused by positive energy being blasted into those locations. And there have been ghost stories or tales of people hearing the sounds of a party, music, laughter, etc. when they enter a room. However, there is no one there. It can also have different layers of different people existing and experiencing different things in that same space over the top of each other. One famous one that comes to mind is the location of the Gettysburg battle. That location there brings up a lot of paranormal footage and captures. The ground's embedded with that battle, the blood, the people are going through those cycles. You'll often see this in pubs and hotels of the patrons and staff or the old owners going through their motions. Again, this is usually not something you can tap into and have intelligent communication with. They're stuck in a loop. They don't know you're there and they don't know that they've passed. Residual haunting activity does not also have to be at a location. I've started to do some research on residual haunting activity attaching to objects, and an interesting find was the reports of people and the studies of people who have had transplants. So the memory built into that organ being passed along to the person who receives it. And a recent case on a show called Evil Things covered a young lady who had a cornea transplant following an accident. And following her transplant, she could witness a murder. She actually called the police several times thinking a man was shooting at her. She felt what was blood running out of her eye. She could see him to make a positive and absolute ID. She could describe the crime scene exactly how it appeared in the crime scene photos. It was so real to her, she opted to have the cornea transplant removed, opted to have a glass eye instead. The same sort of documentary series covered a camera that was carrying a memory of a murder, and every time the girl used the camera, which had been purchased at a police auction, she would get footage of a murder. She returned that to the police station, who confirmed that it was given in error to the auction and should have been destroyed. It had in fact been used by the killer to document the torture and murder of his victims. So it's not just a location that may hold on to the memory. It's not always the event itself. Sometimes it is the land, and that is seen in places like a town called Kapunda, South Australia, in which the copper, quartz and water come together in a particular way to heighten the activity of that entire region, culminating in Kapunda with basically everything's active. I won't say haunted, but it's active. There are many places all over the world like that, and another one that comes to mind that actually has a series made about it is the Ghosts of Shepherdstown, where a lot of the things being encountered by people were a combination of residual activity and ghosts with unresolved activity. The ground itself was then amplifying all of that, and some poltergeist activity was occurring. Which brings us to demons, perhaps the scariest of all. Now, I know I just brought up Ghosts of Shepherdstown. That's actually a situation of a town where you had all three. You had ghosts, you had poltergeist activity, you had the residual activity caused by the location, so the actual ground itself. Then on top of that, you had demonic activity found also. So you had all of them coexisting, and in order to figure out that there was some demonic activity, you kind of have to go through all those other layers. You figure out that there may be ghosts, as we described earlier, and that there's reasons for poltergeist activity, and there's residual, which you can't really, in some cases, do anything about. And once you've dealt with them as best you can, and then you're presented with this other darker force coming through, can lead to finding that demonic activity. Of course, it doesn't happen all the time. It's not uncommon, but it's not common either. It just, it doesn't always happen like that. So yeah, if you're interested in seeing all those layers existing in one location, that's a good one to watch. Right, so demons are said to be defined as an evil spirit or a manifestation of the devil, especially one thought to possess a person or act as a tormentor from hell. Okay, so that's one description. It is commonly accepted that they are insidious, manipulative, and malevolent. There is no good that comes from demonic activity. There is no good to be gained from interacting willingly with demonic activity unless you're there to help someone. Demons have been referenced in countless texts. They're eons old. In religious terms, they're considered to be fallen angels or lower gods who wield some sort of power. A demon isn't out for resolution of an issue, but rather pure, malicious evil, and feeds from your emotional being, mainly fear and anger. So this makes them completely different to any other manifestation of spirit. Demons' sole purpose is to devour, to feed from you until there's nothing left to feed from. Demons don't haunt objects, they don't haunt houses, they are not interested in any of that. However, they are manipulative enough to know, and they are smart enough to know, if they attach to an object, it's a very good way, very good lead-in to a human. So things like Annabelle, Robert the doll, who are said to be possessed with some kind of demonic activity. The demon doesn't get anything from the doll, but it gets attachment to a human from our contact with that doll, hence the no touching rules. The danger and potential for physical destruction associated with demons can be compared to that of a poltergeist. However, it is considered to be much more severe in demonic cases and becomes possession. Okay. Demons have the power to make themselves seen in the human realm and often fool us with beautiful visual appearances, or they will tap into our emotional side by appearing as something that makes us feel trusting or believe that they're vulnerable. This is the theory behind the woman in white, children appearing to people, is that they are actually a manifestation of a demon. If you see a woman harmed on the side of the road or in distress, or a small child, you are less likely to be afraid, and you are more likely to interact with it, buy into its story, and even allow it to remain, not sending it away under some belief that it's a good spirit. So this is where they can become quite dangerous and can sort of fool us, if you like. Demons are also known to manifest themselves in a way or physical form to coax us into committing evil. They can be highly persuasive, manipulative, and tempt us. They prey upon vulnerable, emotionally troubled, and unstable people. However, that's not to say that those who don't fit into those categories cannot be manipulated, influenced, or even possessed. Demons also don't haunt us in the way a ghost will. They do worse. A possession occurs when, through continued cooperation, interaction, communication, or invitation with the demon, a person is essentially inviting the demon into their being and aligns their will with that of the demon. This is where their power of persuasion comes in handy, and they essentially have to convince you to allow them to do this process, which is why they generally prey upon people with some kind of emotional weakness. It doesn't mean they won't try it on others though. It just means you might catch it quicker. But where demonic activity is concerned, it's always good to have your wits about you. It also pays to have other people with you who have their wits about you, and you kind of have each other's backs. Okay, the dealing with of demons is usually performed by a deliverance team, ministers or priests. The actual rite of exorcism performed by the Catholic Church is performed by a Catholic priest. This is not to say that there are not other rituals of exorcisms performed by deliverance teams that are used at the level of demonic, when demonic possession is occurring. Demons have never had human or mortal form. Okay, they are believed, as we mentioned before, that they are fallen angels and belong to Satan or the devil. This means demons are pure energetic forms and can be categorized in three ways, commonly speaking. Angelic, appearing as a being of beauty to manipulate the person into committing something that's sinful, out of the ordinary, or evil, or, whatever it might be. That's how I was saying they appear to you as something beautiful or something that makes you think they are vulnerable. They appear as evil looking. There are reports of people who have seen demons that are incredibly hideous to look at, appearing in horrific forms. This is also not their true appearance. They can appear as a black fog, shadow, mist, or smoke, and a lot of times where there's a demonic haunting in a location, the people will report seeing like a black blob on the floor following them, or a black shadow out of the corner of their eyes following them around. So they can appear in a variety of ways depending on what they believe will get them the best effect from you, I suppose. They know you as well as you know yourself, so they will do what they believe will work. They're also highly intelligent, so they can shift between any of those depending on the situation. It's usually easy to identify as long as they are not in hiding. A demonic haunting can present you with things like revolting stenches, rotting flesh, acidic or burning smells. People often report hearing growling, and any contact made to you will be violent, such as scratching, biting, pushing, dragging. People also report the air feeling heavy, so pressure on their chest pains, inability to breathe, being choked. It's like the air in the room is a thick fog that's tangible, and temperatures will drastically change. In demonic cases, we're talking they get hotter generally. They can go icy cold, but it's generally hotter. Demonic forces are never to be underestimated. Unlike human spirits, they're automatically strong. They don't have to build up that energy, and they don't mind showing off. There have been cases where people have been thrown through the air or violently attacked, including furniture lifting from the ground, knives being thrown and stuck in walls. A demon's main goal is to break your free will down, to break down your mind so they can possess you. It may take days, months, or years. They have no time. That time doesn't exist for them. They've got all the time in the world. While we say demons are not here to rectify any wrong or have no resolution in mind, they do have a hatred for mankind. Their purpose is to destroy us. Okay, so this goes back to the stories of God and Lucifer. Okay, they've lived here for millennia. They've existed as long as life has existed. So this basically means that while we can have measures of dealing with them, we're not in fact destroying them in any way. That's not possible because of the fact they're pure energy. So here's just a quick list of things you could be on the lookout for in the cases of demonic activity. They can be moved on from a location or a purpose through religious provocation. They can change location on a thought, and it doesn't have to be nearby. It can be on the other side of the world. They can also shift in this way between, so a demon may then not reappear for a long time, or it might instantly go somewhere else and repeat the same action. Time and space is by no means a barrier for them. They can change form between human and non-human form. In their energy form, they have no male or female. The one thing that is consistent is the colour, the black colour. And people often report if they do take on a physical form or inhabit an actual person, the eyes are black. So this blackness that they carry with them, they can't escape from. So there are signs that it's demonic. Also, when you're dealing with demonic activity and you are in the situation of using religious techniques to push it away or to escape from its influence, there is a theory of testing the spirit that you're talking with. So this is fairly common for all forms of like spirit communication, and it comes into play with things like the Lady in White stories, and how I said that they can present themselves in those three ways: the beautiful and vulnerable, horrific, or black shadows. When we're dealing with the first variety of this, we want to test that spirit by asking it to declare that it's not demonic. Okay, and they can't do this in the name of, say, if you want to use religious examples, in the name of Jesus, they can't do that 3 times. Although there are cases where they have mocked, imitated, and copied the Trinity. So this is where they can be quite manipulative. But the concept of testing a spirit is a good way to get an indication. It's, of course, by no means a foolproof technique, but it is something employed. So talking about demons, most people then sort of follow on with, well, what do you do? And we're going to save, that in-depth conversation for another episode. But I recently came across this on a group that I follow, and it outlined what happens in a demonic haunting, the different levels of it affecting people. So the first one is infestation. This is where it's just apparent within the environment. Footsteps, voices, apparitions, furniture moving around on their own, things breaking, bad odours with no discernible source. Rather than it directly affecting the people, it affects only the property, objects, or animals within the location. Left unattended, it may lead to oppression, where activity steps up to physical attacks. This may be where you see more violent things, like where we see lots of cupboard doors slamming repetitively all at the same time, or dishes flying out of cupboards. Sleep disturbances, including nightmares or inability to sleep. Frequent and severe illnesses that sort of come out of nowhere and then go away just as quickly with no reason. You may find yourself suddenly suffering from severe depression or anxiety, severe emotional or financial problems, and relationship breakdowns. And while all these things do happen in the normal course of our lives, if they were all happening at the one time in rapid succession, and you have the first infestation sign, it may be a sign of demonic presence. So it's in combination of the two. Okay, then if that was left undealt with, you may then have one, so the haunted location and the oppression, and lead to number 3, which is your possession, and the person becomes obsessed. As this stage, sort of the name implies, the affected person has a hard time functioning and becomes constantly preoccupied with thoughts of the demonic activity in their life. At this stage, sleep and normal daily life are almost impossible. All 3 of these stages can be addressed by competent delivery teams or official exorcists. Apologies, that should be deliverance teams and those skilled in the required religious rituals. Well, that's all we have time for today, and we hope that you've enjoyed this episode of Out of the Darkness, and that you'll join us for the rest of Season 2. We're going to do some more in-depth topics, as well as hear some true accounts of paranormal experiences. If you have a paranormal experience of your own, or a question you would like us to answer, or even a topic that you'd like us to cover, you can write to us at storysubmissions@daparanormal.com. All of our contact details will be available in the notes section of this podcast. Again, we thank you for joining us, and until next time, stay safe.